Have the Denver Broncos gone from a bottom five team to a top five team in just 1 year with Bo Nix? We're tackling that question right now. What up, Broncos country? Time for a little Dover on Denver and a conversation about the Denver Broncos. 1 year with Bo Nix at quarterback. 1 year with the marriage between Bo Nix and Sean Payton. And man, have the Broncos just shot to the top of NFL conversations. And I mean top. What we're going to talk about today is where the Broncos currently sit in kind of the pecking order, power rankings, whatever you want to call them, in just the AFC. We might trickle in a couple of NFC teams towards the end of the show here, but just the AFC. They've been the laughingstock of that conference for 9 years, right? Since they won Super Bowl 50, and 1 year with Bo Nix, it's turned it all around. And I'm going to use something that I saw from BetMGM, and we all know BetMGM, right? They seem to be pretty successful as to what they do in their world. BetMGM has their teams to win the AFC. So that means you're punching your ticket to what would be Super Bowl 60. And their order goes Baltimore, that's the favorite, as they have to get back to the big game in Super Bowl 60. Then Kansas City, then Buffalo, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Denver. Denver and Houston are kind of tied, so there's 6 teams in it, but Denver and Houston are tied and kind of give Denver an advantage there despite some of the Texans' success over the last 2 years, and I'll tell you why coming up. But have they earned that? Just 1 year with Bo Nix, 10 wins, a wild card berth, where we know what happened there, right? I know they scored the first touchdown, and we were all going crazy on our couches when they were playing the Bills there, but it wasn't really close. So did they really make that big of a jump in just 1 year? Well, you look at these teams that are around them, and we'll start with Cincinnati, Los Angeles, and really the Texans. As I said, we can kind of get into that. They lost to the Chargers twice last year. Tough for me to say they're better than the Chargers when the most recent history I have to draw from has them losing in those games. Now, did they get beat down? Was it embarrassing? No, but they still lost those football games. So when it comes to who's in front of them and who they can catch, I think Los Angeles and Cincinnati are right there in front of them. Right there in front of them, and that they can be better than by the time we get through the 25 season and into 26 with playoffs and Super Bowl stuff going. Los Angeles is going to be a problem. Jim Harbaugh's a good coach. Justin Herbert's a heck of a quarterback. They kind of changed their whole identity to letting Justin throw it all over the yard, to being a run first and a good defense identity, and that got them into the postseason where, you know what they did? Of course, you know what they did. They're called the Chargers. They chargered in the playoffs. But right now, I'm still going to put them slightly in front of the Denver Broncos, literally by like that much. The Cincinnati Bengals. It is going to be an interesting offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals. And if they play it right, they're going to remain as a top 3 or 4 team in the AFC. They get it wrong, their window is probably going to start to close just a little bit. And the reason I say that is because Joe Burrow is outstanding. Well, even an outstanding Joe Burrow with a dog poop defense, had to self-edit that one on the fly. A dog poop defense still couldn't find their way into the playoffs. And now you have to pay Jamar Chase and you have to pay T. Higgins. What's that going to do to a star player on the defensive side who might be up next year? When you start to get in these situations, this is why winning on a rookie quarterback contract is the key in the NFL. When you start to get into situations like Cincinnati is, where you're going to pay 3 or 4 guys top market value, you hurt the rest of your roster. So if T. Higgins takes a team-friendly deal, if Joe Burrow restructures and takes way less money to keep these guys around, all right, their window will remain open. I just don't see that being the case. And even if it is, how long does that last? So with Cincinnati and Los Angeles right in front of the Broncos, I really don't think it's that big of a gap between those two teams in front of the Denver Broncos. But when it comes to Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City, there's still a big gap, right? We did tiers for quarterbacks. Last week on Dover on Denver? Well, if we were doing tiers for NFL teams, I think Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City are on a tier above by themselves with no other NFL team really in the same lane that they are. But then you get to that second tier, And I think the Broncos are flirting with it. They're right there. You do a couple of things this offseason. You have to address running back and tight end. We've talked about that over and over, and we're still going to continue to talk about that as free agency gets closer and closer, and then April's draft. But it's those three teams head and shoulders above everybody else in the NFL. Obviously, you got to give the Eagles as reigning Super Bowl champions their credit because they're up there as a top-tier team too. You can't not put them there as Super Bowl champions. But it's not that far between what they are between Cincinnati and Los Angeles. And then the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud took a step back. I know a lot of people wonder if Bo will take that same step back. I think Sean Payton is a better offensive. Actually, I know Sean Payton's a better offensive coach than DeMeco Ryans is. So I trust that the fit, my homeboy Cecil Lammy always talks about it, and he was 100% right. The fit, that's the dirty little secret in sports, right? Sean Payton, Bo Nix fit is better than DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud fit. So I actually look at the Broncos as they'll take a leapfrog this season over who the Houston Texans are. The Texans just happen to play in a really awful division over there, and they just by default are going to win that and find themselves in the postseason. Another quick side note to the Broncos conversation, and something that I've seen now with two major outlets, CBS Sports and I like to say ESPN. I always say that because growing up, Sal Palantonio was my guy, but you probably saw it too. I'm Sal Palantonio, ESPN. So that's just how I say it now. All right. The quick little side note is that CBS Sports and ESPN has the Broncos as one of the teams picked to step back, go the wrong way. They won 10 games, so that means they win 9 or less. And I thought it was interesting as to why both companies cited the step back. It wasn't Bo Nix. There was no mention of a sophomore slump. It was the defense and the fact that both outlets did not believe that the Broncos could achieve what they achieved this year on defense, which is 63 sacks, an all-time franchise record, and led the NFL, and 5 players with 5 or more sacks. Are they going to get to 63 sacks again? I don't know if I can go that high, but can they be at 55, 58? Yeah, they can. Zach Allen's not going anywhere. He was one of the players. Jonathan Cooper's going nowhere. We know Nick Benito's going to go nowhere. Probably re-up with Nick Benito. How about DeAndre Tillman, who we've talked about, an undrafted guy that got to that number? He is going to get better. Jonah Ellis is going to get better. Then you think about the secondary. Riley Moss-Smith, a month of football, and then came back as a rusty Riley. Took a little time to get right, and we know it from the Bengals game. So I don't know if I can get with that, CBS and ESPN. Are they going to be a 63 team? A 63 sack team? Maybe not, but I don't think it's this huge step back where they're a big problem and cannot hold their own weight. So I don't know if I can get with that. I think the defense is just going to be just fine. And if they address inside linebacker, I'd expect the defense to actually get better. So maybe they don't get to 63 sacks, but they had 12 interceptions this last year. What if the sack number goes down 10, but the interception number goes up 5? I think that's a pretty fair trade, right? What do those interceptions turn into? Field position? Heck, if PS2 gets his hands on a couple more, how many of those are house calls? So maybe it's not the sack number that rises up, but it's the interception number that rises up as the defense continues to stay in the same lane and the offense gets better. Another year with Bo. Marvin Mims continues to develop. They draft a running back and a tight end. They sign a running back and a tight end in free agency. The Broncos aren't taking a step back. Though those days are over. Steps forward with Bo Nix and Sean Payton is the only thing this team is going to do. So the Broncos by the end of the season, I think will be looked at as better than the Bengals, as better than the Chargers, as better than the Texans. That puts the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens as the only teams that I see by the time this next season is over that are sitting ahead of the Broncos, kind of in the driver's seat, if you will, of the AFC. And there's still a lot of work to do for the Broncos to be considered with one of those teams. But the giant leap they took, not step, the leap that they took in 2024 was outstanding. And I say it all the time. Bo Nix accelerated this timeline by about 2 or 3 years. So to wrap it up, I think the Broncos are a top 5 team in the AFC. I think they could be a top 4 team. 3 team in the AFC here in the next couple of years. My timeline sort of looks like this. When can they win the AFC West? That's coming in the next 2 years. The Chargers or the Broncos will be AFC West champions in the next 2 years. The Chiefs are still a contender and still a big pain in our you-know-whats. But they're not the same team. They will not dominate the AFC West. So timeline to win the division is 2 years. Timeline to win the AFC, it's that same timeline. It's 2 years. And then obviously, if you win the AFC and you're in the Super Bowl, if you're in the dance, you have a chance. So you get to it. You have that defense. You trust in Sean Payton and Bo Nix. It's a 2-year timeline here where the Broncos will be looked at as a top 3 team in the AFC and have a chance to win the freaking Super Bowl. Broncos country, how does that make you feel? It's got to feel good compared to what we've lived through the last 9 years. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section while you're here. Like and subscribe. Check out everything that we're doing on Denver Sports YouTube. I'll circle back, react to your comments, but you tell me, Broncos country, am I off my rocker or is the porridge just right in Broncos country? This has been Dover on Denver, and now I'm done.